So the other day I was chilling in bed. It was 3 a.m. I was just scrolling through TikTok. And then knock, 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 knock. My wife and her new boyfriend come walking in. And they proceed to just start making out right in front of me. She was making eye contact with me the whole time. So I could tell this dude was a sucker. Because obviously he wasn't getting her off. Her loyal husband that has her heart and mind was. And then they were about to have snoodly poop right in front of me. And then my girlfriend pushes him off and says, "You take it." And she sat in the corner and said, "Take it and I'll watch." And I proceeded to take it for 30 minutes straight. And then after I was done taking it, I got up to leave. As I opened the door, my girlfriend said, "Hey, there's something running down your back." And with that being said, that made me think of an idea. I made so much lists for my YouTube videos. I made top 10 quarterbacks of all time. I made top 10 offensive seasons of all time. Why don't I make a top 10 running backs of all time? And that's what this video is about. So let's get into it. Whoa, 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 whoa. If you don't want to be forced to have intercourse with your wife's new boyfriend, like, comment, subscribe, and let's get into this. Now, before we really get into this, I'd like to say I value peak performance from a running back way more than longevity. Even though Frank Gore is my favorite player of all time, he will not be on this list because his peak doesn't match up to these 10. And I value playoff performance. If you are the number one weapon on your team and you can carry that into the playoffs and maybe even be the best player on a championship team at the running back position, that says a lot about you. So let's get into this top 10. Number 10, Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry might be the most talented running back in NFL history. His size and frame combined with his speed make it a great argument. And something that we're not acknowledging at this moment is he has a serious chance to become the NFL all-time leading rusher, seeing he's 5,000 yards away. And if you consider last year he put up 1,595 yards and the year before he almost went for 2,000, it's not a stretch to say he can do it. And let's say he plays 7 more years and he puts up 800 yards a season. There's a very good chance he could be the NFL all-time leading rusher and he can climb higher on this list. But with that being said, why put him over other running backs? His peak is insane. From 2018 to 2025, he went over 1,500 yards 4 times. He went over 1,900 yards twice. He has 8 straight years of having 10 plus rushing touchdowns. And in this span, he has 100 total rushing touchdowns in a 6-year span. He made a first team All-Pro. He was Offensive Player of the Year in 2020 when he went over 2,000 yards. And as a pure rusher, not a lot of running backs in NFL history have this kind of peak to them. He's an all-time great playoff performer, especially with the Tennessee Titans. Against the Ravens in the 2019 divisional round, the Tennessee Titans were heavy underdogs until Derrick Henry went for 30 carries, 195 rushing yards, and 1 passing touchdown. And the week before that, against the Patriots in the 2019 wild card, the Tennessee Titans weren't favored, but Derrick Henry went for 34 carries, 182 rushing yards, and 1 touchdown. The 2019 playoffs for Derrick Henry is one of the greatest running back postseasons in NFL history. And not to mention he has more great playoff games, like his stat line against the Steelers in the 2024 wild card where he went for 186 and 2 touchdowns. His stat line against the Chiefs in 2017 where he went 23 carries, 156 yards, and a touchdown. He's one of the greatest running backs of all time. I already have him top 10, and as he climbs the all-time leading rushing list, I'll have him even higher. But with that being said, number 10, Derrick Henry. Number 9, Adrian Peterson. Out of all the football I watched live in my lifetime, this is the greatest running back I've ever seen. You could argue he's up there with Derrick Henry as the greatest pure rusher in NFL history, but I give the edge to Derrick Henry. But with that being said, Adrian Peterson's top 5 all-time in rushing. His peak is insane. He's the last NFL running back to win MVP in 2012, rushing for 2,097 yards. He was the best running back in the league for almost a decade from 2007 to 2015. He might not have postseason success, but as a pure rusher, his peak is one of the greatest of all time. In Adrian Peterson's peak from 2007 to 2015, he rushed for 11,675 yards, 97 rushing touchdowns, and almost averaged 5 yards per carry. And not to mention, he had insane longevity because he is still the oldest running back to rush for 1,000 yards. And while I value peak performance, and I genuinely do think Derrick Henry has had a better peak when it comes to playoff performance plus regular season performance, the longevity from Adrian Peterson gives him the slight edge here because his peak is just as good and he has 2 times the amount of longevity. But with that being said, the number 9 greatest running back of all time is Adrian Peterson. Number 8, Eric Dickerson. Now, if we were just talking about pure regular season running back peaks, this is the greatest running back peak in NFL history. Eric Dickerson broke on the scene in 1983, rushing for 1,808 yards and 18 touchdowns, averaging 113 yards a game. He was first team All-Pro, Offensive Rookie of the Year, placed second in MVP, and placed second in Offensive Player of the Year. And then his second year was his magnum opus, maybe the greatest pure rushing regular season in NFL history, where he set the record for the most rushing yards in a season, rushing for 2,105 yards, 14 touchdowns, averaged 131.6 yards a game, a 16-game season NFL record, was first team All-Pro once again, placed second in Offensive Player of the Year, and second MVP due to Dan Marino having an insane 1984. '84. He would go over 1,500 yards again in '86 with 1,821 yards, and he would go over 1,500 yards again in 1988. While peak for peak, bar for bar in his regular season, it might not be touched by any other running back in NFL history, but simply put, he did not have the longevity, and he did not have the playoff peaks that other running backs have that are above him. Again, he is one of the greatest pure rushers of all time, with the last two I named in Adrian Peterson and Derrick Henry, but due to lack of playoff performances compared to the guys I have above him, and due to overall better peak seasons and peaks the running backs have above him, he is at number 8 on my list. Number 7, Marshall Faulk. Marshall Faulk is one of the most influential running backs in NFL history. While he might not be as good of a pure rusher as the last two guys, he is probably the greatest receiving running back in NFL history, after Christian McCaffrey. In a vid I posted a few weeks ago, I said Marshall Faulk had the third greatest running back season of all time in 1999. He would rush for 1,381 yards, 7 touchdowns, average 5.5 yards a carry, and he'd also bring in 87 receptions for 1,048 yards, the second running back in NFL history to have 1,000 yards rushing and 1,000 yards receiving. That season, he would be first team All-Pro, and he would be Offensive Player of the Year. That was the start of his three-peat of the Offensive Player of the Year award, because in 2000, he would go for 1,359 yards, 18 touchdowns, on 830 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns, and be first team All-Pro, MVP, and Offensive Player of the Year for the second year in a row. And then in 2001, Marshall Faulk would go for 1,382 yards, 12 touchdowns, 765 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns, and he would be first team All-Pro, place second in MVP, and place first in Offensive Player of the Year to end his three-peat of the award. In these 3 seasons, he placed second in MVP twice, and he won an MVP as a running back. He was considered a top 2 player for 3 years in the NFL at the running back position. And not to mention, he went over 2,000 yards from scrimmage 4 times in his career. Peak for peak, there's not a lot more running backs that have done better. I could really argue only a few guys have had a better regular season peak than Marshall Faulk, and that would be Eric Dickerson and a few other guys we'll get to later on this list. But Marshall Faulk's one of the greatest players of all time. He has the 3rd greatest running back season of all time. He's arguably the most dynamic running back of all time. With that being said, my 7th greatest running back of all time is Marshall Faulk. Number 6, LaDainian Tomlinson. Just like Marshall Faulk, this is one of the most dynamic running backs of all time. And in that video I made a few weeks ago, I said this is the 2nd greatest running back season in NFL history. Simply put, his peak is insane. Because in 2006, LaDainian Tomlinson would go for 1,815 yards, leading the league in rushing. He'd rush for 28 rushing touchdowns, which is an NFL record. He'd average 5.2 yards an attempt, 113.4 yards a game. He would have 508 receiving yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. He would have a total of 31 total touchdowns from a non-quarterback. That is outright insane. He would be first team All-Pro, he'd be MVP, and he would be Offensive Player of the Year. While 2006 LaDainian Tomlinson is talked about a lot, the next year he would follow it up with another first team All-Pro, going for 1,474 rushing yards, leading the league, going for 15 rushing touchdowns, which led the league, averaged 4.7 yards an attempt, 92.1 yards a game, 475 receiving yards, and 3 receiving touchdowns. And then in 2004, 2 years before his 2006 season, he would snatch another first team All-Pro. He would go for 1,335 yards, 17 rushing touchdowns, leading the league in that stat, which would make him lead the league in rushing touchdowns 3 times in his career. But with that being said, LaDainian Tomlinson was the heart and soul of the San Diego Chargers. He's one of the greatest running backs of all time, and in my list, he's the 6th greatest running back in NFL history. Number 5, Terrell Davis. Now this is going to be my hot take. Terrell Davis is the 5th greatest running back we have ever seen. Terrell Davis has the greatest running back season in NFL history, and it's not even close. And he is by far the greatest postseason running back in NFL history, averaging 140 rushing yards per game in the playoffs. And in 8 playoff games, he has 1,140 yards total and 12 touchdowns. And like I said previously, he has the greatest running back season in NFL history and greatest peak of all time for the running back position. So let's talk about it. 1998 Terrell Davis. 1998 Terrell Davis went for 2,008 rushing yards, 21 rushing touchdowns. Both led the league. He averaged 5.1 yards an attempt, which led the league. Averaged 125.5 yards a game, which led the league. And he went first team All-Pro, MVP, and Offensive Player of the Year. But that is not where this season ends, because this is the greatest running back postseason in NFL history. And if this isn't the greatest postseason run in NFL history by a running back, it would be only topped by another Terrell Davis postseason that tops this, that we'll get to later. People do not credit Terrell Davis enough for the Denver Broncos winning back-to-back Super Bowls. With that being said, let's get into the 1998 postseason. So the Denver Broncos had a first-round bye and went to the divisional round against the Miami Dolphins. Terrell Davis went for 21 attempts, 199 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, leading the Denver Broncos to a 38-3 stomping of the Miami Dolphins. And then the conference championship comes. And in this game, Terrell Davis goes for 32 attempts, 167 rushing yards, and 1 rushing touchdown. But with that being said, the Denver Broncos will win the conference championship against the New York Jets 23-10. And then in the Super Bowl against the Atlanta Falcons, Terrell Davis would go for 25 attempts, 102 yards, and was the best player on the best team in the NFL, and debatably the best player in the world at this time. There's not a season like 1998 Terrell Davis. It doesn't really even come close in my opinion. This is the greatest running back season of all time. This is one of the greatest postseasons of all time. And this is not even where the insanity ends with this guy at his peak. Because in 1997, Terrell Davis went for 1,750 yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, which led the league, was first team All-Pro, placed third in MVP, and second Offensive Player of the Year. And then the playoffs came once again. In the wildcard round against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Terrell Davis went for 31 attempts, 184 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. And of course that would lead to the divisional round where the Denver Broncos would play the Kansas City Chiefs. And Terrell Davis in this game would go for 25 attempts, 101 yards, and had both touchdowns that the Denver Broncos scored this game. The offense wasn't going, passing game wasn't going, Shannon Sharp wasn't going, and who showed up? Terrell Davis. He is the best player in the world at this point, leading the eventual Super Bowl champions. And then in the conference championship against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Terrell Davis would go for 26 attempts, 139 yards, and 1 rushing touchdown to lead the Denver Broncos to a 24-21 win and send them to the Super Bowl. And in this Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers, the Denver Broncos will win 31-24. And Terrell Davis would go for 30 attempts, 157 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns to win Super Bowl MVP. You could make a legit argument for 1997 and 1998, Terrell Davis was the best player in the world. This is the greatest running back peak of all time. He has the 2 greatest running back playoff runs in NFL history. He has the greatest running back season in NFL history. And he's the greatest playoff performer at the running back position. With that being said, that's why Terrell Davis is my 5th greatest running back in NFL history. Number 4, Emmitt Smith. While Emmitt Smith ran behind the greatest offensive line of all time, we should not underplay his peak that much. While he was probably in the greatest situation a running back could ever be in, he was incredibly durable and he was incredibly athletic. And he was a great pure rusher of the football. He led the league in rushing yards 4 times, led the league in rushing touchdowns 3 times. He went for 20 plus rushing touchdowns in back-to-back NFL season. He was MVP in 1993. He had 4 straight first-team All-Pros, and like I said, he's the all-time leading rusher in NFL history. And not to mention, he was one of the greatest postseason running backs of all time. In the Super Bowl versus the Bills, he went for 30 carries, 132 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, and won Super Bowl MVP. In the 1993 NFC Championship game against the Giants, he went for 24 carries, 168 total yards, and a touchdown. In the 1992 NFC Championship versus 49ers, he went for 114 yards. Versus the Packers in the 1995 NFC Championship, he went for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against the Vikings in the 1996 wildcard, he went for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. And combine this with his all-time regular season dominance. Even though he was behind the greatest offensive line in NFL history, he's one of the greatest running backs of all time. He's top 5 for sure, and his peak plus his longevity gives him the all-time leading rusher mark. Because from 1990 to 2001, he went for an insane 16,187 yards, 148 rushing touchdowns, and was a staple of the Dallas Cowboys dynasty. So with that being said, the 4th greatest running back in NFL history is Emmitt Smith. Number 3, Walter Payton. If you consider that Walter Payton had 1,852 yards in a 14-game season, he is ridiculous. He retired the all-time leading rusher. He might be one of the greatest pure rushers of all time. And skill set wise, there's never been more of a complete running back in NFL history. His combination of speed, power, balance, and agility, it's second to none. It's simply beautiful to watch him run the ball. And not to mention, he's great in the passing game as well, the most complete running back in NFL history. And simply put, his 1977 season is one of the greatest ever. He led the league in rushing yards, he led the league in rushing touchdowns, yards a game, yards an attempt, and was first team All-Pro, won an MVP, and was Offensive Player of the Year. But that's not his only great year, because in another 14-game season the year before, he went for 1,390 yards, 13 touchdowns, and was first team All-Pro again. And not to mention, his peak really never ended. The only thing that killed it was injury, and he had longevity on his side. He could have 5 first-team All-Pros as a running back, which is just ridiculous. He retired with 110 rushing touchdowns, and he could do it any way possible. He is the archetype for an all-time great running back, and you could still argue to this day no one's really done it better than Walter Payton did on the ground. Walter Payton's peak dominance wasn't built in system or with help. He was facing stacked boxes every snap and still putting up MVP level production at the running back position. His lack of playoff starts is more about the situation than performance. He dominated in the hardest possible conditions with this shitty Chicago Bears teams in the mid-70s. Simply put, Walter Payton's regular season peak is top 3 in NFL history, and it's really not debatable. And when he retired, it was him and only one other guy at the top of the greatest running backs of all time, and that guy was number 2, Jim Brown. Holy shit. Jim Brown's stats were insane. This dude led the league in rushing 8 times out of the 9 years he played. There was nobody putting up stats like Jim Brown. In 1958, Jim Brown went for 1,527 rushing yards and 17 rushing touchdowns, and he was first-team All-Pro and won his second MVP. And by the way, in his rookie year, Jim Brown went for 942 rushing yards, 9 rushing touchdowns, led the league in both stats, by the way, and in his rookie year, he was MVP and first-team All-Pro. And by the way, him having 1,500 yards, 1,300 yards, 1,200 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,800 yards, 1,400 yards, 1,500 yards, and back-to-back seasons was all in 12 and 14 game seasons. This dude was unstoppable. He's the Wilt Chamberlain of the running back position. He earned 8 first-team All-Pros as a running back. He won 3 MVPs, and this isn't even the holy grail of his seasons, because in 1963 he went for 1,863 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns, leading the league in both in 14 games. He averaged 133.1 yards a game, led the league, and 6.4 yards an attempt in 1963. Jim Brown was unreal for his time. Nobody was putting up these stats like Jim Brown. Like I said earlier, there's multiple seasons where other running backs didn't touch 1,000 yards and Jim Brown got 1,500 or 1,400 yards in those seasons. And when he retired, he was the greatest football player to ever live. So with that being said, my second greatest running back in NFL history is Jim Brown. Number 1, Barry Sanders. When it comes to agility, when it comes to making a man miss, there is nobody else like Barry Sanders. He has the greatest regular season running back peak of all time. Why, you may ask? Because his whole career was his peak. He didn't miss having 1,000 yards rushing once. The reason he has a lack of great playoff performances, just like Walter Payton, this dude was on the 1990 Detroit Lions. By the way, after Barry Sanders won a playoff game with the Lions in the early 90s, they wouldn't win another playoff game until the 2020s. But with that being said, who knows what the rushing yard record would be if Barry Sanders never retired. He didn't miss a 1,000-yard rushing year for the 10 years he played. He was a 6-time first-team All-Pro. He won the 1997 MVP, which was one of the greatest running back seasons of all time, where Barry Sanders went for 2,053 rushing yards, leading the league. He would also lead the league in rushing in 1996 at 1,553. He would also lead the league in rushing in 1994 at 1,883. And he would also lead the league in rushing yards in 1990 at 1,304. In only a 10-year period, Barry Sanders rushed for 15,269 rushing yards. That was second all-time at his retirement. There is no peak like Barry Sanders. There's no greater running back than Barry Sanders. He's simply the greatest running back of all time. But with that being said, that's going to be the end of this video, y'all. Y'all probably disagree with a little bit of this list, but comment it down below. With that being said, like, comment, subscribe. I'll catch y'all boys later. Peace.